Well, before I get started, I wanted to share a quick vignette. I asked some of my coworkers to capture the essence of a day in the office.
We need to have better communication.
We need to work on better communication.
What did you spend that money on?
Did you read my email about that?
Did you read my email about that?
Did you even read my email about that?
Did you read my email about that?
Did you read my email about that?
Why didn't you respond to my text?
Why didn't you respond to my text?
Why don't you respond to my text?
Why didn't you respond to my text?
Why didn't you respond to my text?
Why are you always late?
What did you spend that money on?
We need to talk.
What did we spend the money for?
We need to talk.
What did we spend that money on?
We need to have better communication.
We need to talk.
What did we spend that money for?
Why are you always late?
We need to talk.
Sounds like a typical day, right? Well, the really funny part is you've just heard about 75% of the conversation starters that we hear at home on a weekly basis. Our lives at work and our lives at home are not that different. And I came to this realization one day as I was driving home. You see, I'd been using my commute at the end of the day as a sort of mental transition period where I could take my mind off the things I was dealing with at work, my budget, deadlines, issues with people, and start to put my mind on the things I needed to deal with at home, like my budget, deadlines, and issues with people. And then it hit me. For all my training and skills and ambition as a leader, I really wasn't deploying that much of it at home. You know, at work, I'm hard charging and results focused and motivating my people, and at home it was more of a maintenance mode, just kind of keeping things moving. The idea that I had, and I wanted to share with all of you, is that leadership at work begins at home. I did a little research, and what I found validated my assessment and scared the hell out of me a little bit. So in 2008, just as we're entering the Great Recession, Aon Consulting reported that 56% of companies self-identified as having a lack of leadership talent. So I asked myself, at a time when leadership would be needed the most, we have this kind of shortage of talent in the marketplace. What does that mean for our households, for our neighborhoods? What problems in our communities remain unsolved because of a lack of leadership at home? How would we even assess the leadership skills of our households? Well, I think you'd all agree that organizations with strong leadership are, one, financially healthy and stable, and two, serving and strengthening the communities in which they reside. So how are our household leaders doing? Well, in 2016, the Federal Reserve did a study and found out that 44% of American adults cannot cover an emergency expense of $400, or they would have to sell something or borrow the money to cover it. The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development in 2015 stated that household debt was 112% of net disposable income. The U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics also in 2015 reported that 25% of Americans volunteer in their community. And among those who serve, the median number of hours spent volunteering was 52, approximately 1 work week per year, less than a work week for some of us. So why is there this much room for improvement? Is it because people lack leadership ambition? Well, I don't think the data supports that. CareerBuilder, along with the Harvard Business Review, asked people about their aspirations for leadership. And what the data clearly shows is that among all age groups, and particularly among younger people, there's a clear desire to be a leader. Is it because leadership skills at home really are not the same as the skills needed in business? I don't think the data supports that either. The same CareerBuilder Harvard Business Review study, citing research by Zenger and Folkman, shows me that the leadership traits needed at home are the same as the ones needed in business, nonprofit, and the public sector, which were all areas studied by Zenger and Folkman. None of these skills require any sort of special training or know-how. They're behaviors that I see in my neighborhood, in Detroit, all over the world. They're behaviors we learn at home. I believe that the gap is due to the lack of an actionable plan. The tools we learn in business are equally, if not more valuable, when deployed in your household. One example of a transferable tool is the triple bottom line, or the 3 Ps: purpose, profit, and people. I decided to use this tool in my own household after I got fed up enough with being reactionary and at the apparent mercy of external circumstances. I swore that I would use all my leadership ability that I'd been hanging up like an extra coat at home to make sure that my household didn't just survive, but thrive, starting with purpose. I had been involved in a lot of mission, vision, values workshops in my various employers. So I thought having this compass pointing to true north would also be valuable in leading my household. So I spent the summer of 2010 in family meetings, talking about what mattered most to us. How did we envision our future? What big, hairy, audacious goals do we want to set for ourselves? And we put that to paper. And then, like a lot of organizations, we posted a summary on the wall in the busiest room in the building, our kitchen. These values help us facilitate the big decisions, but they also filter out the noise that can cloud our judgment. By no means does your household's purpose need to even be this elaborate. There are plenty of companies, and plenty of households for that matter, with a very straightforward and direct purpose: survival. What's important is that the purpose is identified and pursued. Regarding profit, I believe the strategy here, the value, is self-evident. Knowing your profitability and your cash flow are the basics for enabling your purpose. And more profit enables what? More purpose. Knowing your financials leads your household to prioritize, to insulate against risk, to be generous. Since my own household's revenue is not very highly diversified, we basically have the revenue generated from mine and my wife's jobs, we've decided that our financial strategy is risk mitigation, flexibility, and fun. If I lost my job tomorrow, nothing in my household would have to change for 6 months. And I've never been out of work for more than 90 days. Risk, mitigation. We're prepared for surprises, the kind of surprises that come with owning a home, owning a car, having children. We have the flexibility to be generous when the need arises. And right now, looking at current events, there's a lot of need. We plan our fun. Fun is not what's left over after we've spent everything else. Fun is part of our purpose, because making memories is part of our purpose. So we plan our vacations. We plan the experiences we want to give to our children. We plan and allocate resources for those things because they're part of our purpose. But we need profit to enable the purpose. We recently discovered a cash bleed in our finances. Now, we're still profitable, but let me ask everybody, what happens to the growing, profitable organization that runs out of cash? Right, it either ceases to exist, right, or it gets consumed. Maybe moving in with friends and family, maybe moving back home, right? These types of outcomes are prime reasons why profit needs to be a focus in your household. People is my favorite part of the plan. Everybody in my household is part of the leadership team. My wife's the CEO, and that's not in response to any sort of diversity initiative. It's simply because she's the best visionary in the house, with intuition that blows my mind, and I learn so much from her. I'm the CFO, the process-oriented numbers guy who wrings efficiency out of the household and finds the resources to enable our purpose. Our children, they're the innovation heads. They are unconstrained in their thinking, so they make really great sounding boards for us. And as they get older, they'll learn a little bit more about the operations side of things. But we're raising the next generation of leaders, and none of us knows who among this generation will change the world. And that's why we must demonstrate leadership for them, so that their homes, their communities will be strong. I've learned more about leadership from my children than anybody else, I think. I remember my daughter's homework once wasn't living up to mine and my wife's expectations, so we made an agreement. She was to leave her homework out the night before bedtime, and my wife and I would check it, and we would leave it out for her so that the next morning she could make corrections before we left for school. Great plan, right? Clear direction, good leadership, this is what we're going to do. Well, There were more than a couple of days when the homework didn't get checked until the following morning. And this put our whole morning in a crunch. My daughter was clearly exasperated. So one morning I asked her what was wrong. She hesitated for a moment, and then she asserted herself and held her leaders accountable. You and Mommy told me that if I left my homework out, you would check it and I would have time to correct it in the morning, and I've done that. Now every morning we're in a hurry, even though I did what you told me. I quietly listened to her while I raged in my mind. Are you kidding me? Who does she think she is? Does she think her mother and I want to check her homework? The reason we're checking it is to help her. If she'd do it right the first time, we wouldn't even have to check it. In that moment, I wanted to use all my parental authority to swat down her clearly stated concern and, for good measure, give a voice to my very negative thoughts so she would know it was her fault we were late every morning because she couldn't do her homework right the first time. Instead, I collected myself. I had a quick mental conversation about how to address her concern and also solve the real problem, that we hadn't lived up to our end of the agreement. I spoke. You're right. We told you that if you left your homework out, we would check it and you would have time in the morning to correct it, and we have not done that. I'm sorry, and I will make sure that Mommy and I communicate better about getting your homework checked so that you have time to correct it before we go to school. She was so proud of herself, and I was proud of her. She was assertive and relatively non-emotional. Remember, she's like 10. She had a look on her face, though, that told me I had done the right thing as a leader in the household. She looked reassured and confident that we had addressed her concern, and her faith in us as leaders had been restored. Plus, the quality of her work has gone up, which has led to us actually checking it less. That's the leadership lesson my 10-year-old taught me. Communicate with your people, live up to your commitments, and allow yourself to be held accountable when the circumstances warrant it. Now, all of this is translatable back to the workplace. The triple bottom line reminds me about my people at work, just like it reminds me to remember my people at home. There's nothing magical about the triple bottom line or any other management tool. It's the leadership decision to deploy these tools at home that makes all the difference. Whether you subscribe to the butterfly effect or the small drop in a still pond that creates a large ripple, or any of a number of other metaphors where a small amount of activity results in an outsized influence, the leadership imperative is to believe that by focusing on your team, your family, your household, that you can have that kind of impact. Believe in your purpose, ensure profitability, invest in your people. Leadership at work begins at home. The most important leadership position I've ever had is in my house, and I'm using it to change the world. I pray you do too. Thank you.